My sister slapped me across the face at Thanksgiving dinner. Not in private. Not in a hallway. Not in a moment where everyone could pretend they had not seen it. She did it at the dining room table, between the sweet potatoes and the turkey my mother had spent 2 days preparing, while my father sat at the head of the table with his carving knife still in his hand. For 1 second, nobody moved. The room was so quiet I could hear the old furnace clicking under the floorboards. Then my sister Rachel laughed, not because anything was funny, because she thought laughter would decide what the room was allowed to believe. "Oh, come on," she said, rubbing the palm she had just used on my face. "Don't give me that marine stare. You know you deserved it." My mother lowered her eyes. My father put down the knife, and I sat there with the left side of my face burning, my dress blues jacket hanging on the back of my chair, and 18 years of swallowed humiliation sitting in my throat like a loaded round. My name is Emily Carter. I am 41 years old. I have served 18 years in the United States Marine Corps. I have moved fuel, ammunition, medical supplies, vehicles, generators, and emergency equipment through storms, deserts, ports, and places most civilians will never know exist. I have signed inventories in the dark with mortar fire close enough to shake dust from ceiling panels. I have slept on floors, eaten cold meals from plastic, and learned how to keep a convoy moving when a single missing part could put lives at risk. But that night, in my father's house, my family still looked at me like the least important person at the table. That was their mistake, because it was not my father's house. It was mine. 15 years earlier, when my father lost half his retirement money in a bad investment with a man who called himself a wealth strategist, I bought the house to keep my parents from losing it. I paid off the arrears. I refinanced the mortgage under my name. I paid the property taxes. I paid the insurance. I replaced the roof after a storm for $22,000. I replaced the furnace for $9,000. I repaired the foundation for $16,000 after my father said, "It's just a little settling," while the basement wall cracked like a warning. The deed was in my name. The 2 cars in the driveway were in my name. The insurance policies were in my name. The emergency credit line my sister used every time her life collapsed was connected to an account I funded. For 18 years, I had been the quiet infrastructure under my family's comfortable lies, and they had mistaken infrastructure for dirt. Thanksgiving started badly before the slap. Rachel arrived 40 minutes late, wearing a white coat she could not afford and carrying a bottle of wine I suspected my mother had paid for. She was 38, divorced twice, unemployed again, and still somehow treated like the delicate one. My parents called her passionate. They called me distant. Rachel called me Sergeant Spreadsheet, even though I was not a sergeant and the insult made no sense. That had never stopped her. She kissed my mother on both cheeks, handed my father the wine, looked at me in uniform, and said, "Still dressing up so people remember you have a personality?" My mother smiled nervously. "Rachel, please." I took a sip of water. Rachel sat across from me and began. She always began. "Must be nice," she said, "to disappear for months and then come home acting like everyone should salute." "I'm home for 4 days," I said. "Oh, we know. You made sure everyone knew your schedule." I emailed it because Mom asked when I was arriving. Rachel rolled her eyes. "She asked because you make everything formal." My father chuckled. Not because Rachel was funny, because he had trained himself to reward the loudest person. I looked at him. He looked away. That was the old pattern. Rachel provoked. Mother softened. Father avoided. I absorbed. Dinner continued. My mother asked about work. Before I could answer, Rachel said, "Let me guess. Emily organized boxes heroically." I set down my fork. Logistics keeps people alive. Rachel laughed. Here we go. My father sighed. Emily, don't take everything so seriously. I looked at him. She mocked my service. She was teasing. She has been teasing for 18 years. My mother's hands moved nervously in her lap. Girls, please, it's Thanksgiving. Girls. I was 41. Rachel was 38. But in that house, age froze wherever it served the story. Rachel leaned forward. You want respect so badly? Maybe try having an actual life. No husband, no kids, no home of your own. Just bases and paperwork and pretending that moving supplies makes you some kind of hero. I felt the first crack inside me then. Not rage. Recognition. Some insults hurt because they are surprising. Others hurt because they confirm what people have been implying for years. I said quietly, "Be careful." Rachel smiled. Or what? You'll deploy at me? That was when she reached across the table and slapped me. It was not hard enough to injure me. It was hard enough to mean what it meant. The sound landed before the pain. My mother whispered, "Rachel." My father stood. For one brief second, I thought he was finally going to do the thing a father should do when one daughter strikes another. He looked at Rachel, then at me, and chose the easier target. "Emily," he said, voice low, "go outside and cool off." I stared at him. I was just hit. "You escalated it." I almost laughed. "You watched her slap me, and I watched you sit there with that judgmental look on your face all night." Rachel leaned back, victorious. My mother said nothing. Snow was beginning outside, soft and silver beyond the dining room window. My father pointed toward the front door. "Leave." The word hit harder than the slap. "Dad, don't make me say it again. This is my family too." He slammed his hand on the table. "Not tonight. Not in my house. Get out and don't come back until you can show some respect." My house. There it was. The lie he had lived inside so long he believed it had walls. I stood slowly, not because I wanted drama, because if I moved too quickly, I might say everything. And I still loved them enough to give them one last quiet chance. I looked at my mother. She kept her eyes on her plate. That hurt most. Rachel's slap had been anger. My father's order had been pride. My mother's silence was permission. I walked to the hallway, took my coat, and opened the front door. Snow blew in. "Behind me," Rachel said. "Don't forget your little medals." No one corrected her. I drove to the Hampton Inn outside town with my cheek burning and my phone buzzing before I reached the highway. "Mom, Dad, Rachel," then Dad again. I did not answer. At the hotel, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at the red mark on my face. It was already fading. That felt unfair. Some injuries leave too quickly for others to believe they happened. I took a photo anyway. Then I sat on the bed in my coat, boots still on, and opened my laptop. There are moments when a person stops crying not because the pain ends, but because clarity arrives and takes command. I opened the folder named Family. Inside were subfolders: House, Vehicles, Insurance, Rachel, Taxes, Utilities, Medical, Emergency Transfers, The evidence of 18 years of rescue was organized better than my family had ever deserved. My attorney, David Kim, answered on the second ring, even though it was Thanksgiving night. That is why I paid him a retainer. Emily, he said, sleepy but alert. Are you safe? Yes. Good. What happened? My sister assaulted me. My father removed me from a property I own. I want to enforce everything. There was a pause. David had known me for 9 years. He had watched me create legal structures around family support because, in his words, generosity without paperwork becomes future evidence for someone else's entitlement. He asked one question, "Are you sure?" I looked at the photograph of my cheek. Then I thought of my mother's eyes on her plate. Yes. Then we do it cleanly. That was why I trusted him. He did not say revenge. He said cleanly. The next morning, while my family was probably eating leftovers in a house they had forgotten was legally mine, David's office began preparing notices. Termination of informal occupancy permission. Recovery of vehicles titled to Emily Carter. Cancellation of authorized use on emergency accounts. Removal of auto pay for utilities, non-owner insurance add-ons, and household support transfers. Review of all expenditures connected to Rachel Carter. Everything legal. Everything documented. No tricks. No cruelty. Just ownership returning to its owner. My father called at 9:12 a.m. I let it ring. He texted at 9:14. Your mother is upset. You need to apologize. At 9:20, Rachel texted, You really ran to a hotel like a victim? Grow up. At 9:44, my mother texted, Please don't let this ruin Thanksgiving. I stared at that message for a long time. That was what she called it. Not the slap. Not being thrown out. Not years of disrespect. A small inconvenience threatening the peace she had mistaken for family. I typed back one sentence. You will receive legal communication soon. Then I turned off my phone. The vehicles were recovered Monday. Professionally, quietly. No dramatic tow truck scene for neighbors to film. A representative arrived with paperwork. The sedan my mother drove to church and the pickup my father used for hardware store trips were both taken from the driveway. My father called David first. Then me. This time, I answered. What did you do? He shouted. I recovered vehicles titled in my name. You humiliated us. No. Dad, I stopped financing transportation for people who threw me out in the snow. That truck is mine. The title is not. I'm your father. I know. You owe us more than this. There it was again. The sentence beneath every sentence. You owe us. For being born. For being difficult. For not needing enough. For succeeding too quietly. For having the money when they did not. I said, I paid for the house. I paid for the cars. I paid the taxes, insurance, roof, furnace, foundation, utilities, and Rachel's emergencies. What exactly do I owe that I haven't already paid? Silence. Then anger came back because anger is easier than math. You think money makes you superior? No. I think ownership gives me legal responsibility, and I'm done using responsibility to subsidize disrespect. He hung up. By Tuesday, the house received formal notice. My parents had a period to vacate. David made sure every deadline complied with state law. No shortcuts. No illegal eviction. No power shutoffs. No threats. I did not want to become the villain my family needed me to be. That would have made things too easy for them. Rachel called that evening from my mother's phone. I almost did not answer. Then I did, because some doors need to be closed out loud. "You are insane," she said. "Hello to you too. You're kicking Mom and Dad out of their own house?" "My house. You don't even live here. I paid so they could—" "You're punishing them because I slapped you?" "No. The slap was the moment I stopped pretending the arrangement was love." She made a disgusted sound. "You always do this. You keep score." "I kept records." "Same thing." "No. Scores are for games. Records are for people who know the truth will be challenged." She went quiet. Then she said, "Mom says you paid for my hospital bill." "Yes." "And my apartment deposit?" "Yes." "And school?" "Some of it." Her voice changed. Not softer. Smaller. "I thought Dad did." "I know. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I thought helping without humiliating you was kindness." She breathed into the phone. For the first time in years, Rachel had no performance ready. Then she ruined it. "Well, you should have told me if you were going to hold it over my head later." I closed my eyes. "I'm not holding it over your head. I'm taking my hand away from under you." She hung up. That sentence stayed with me, because it was true in ways I had not fully understood. For years, my family had not been standing. They had been leaning, and I had mistaken their weight for closeness. The first month was chaos. Not for me. For them. My father discovered property taxes were not handled by the mortgage company like he claimed. They were paid from my account. My mother discovered the insurance had not been cheap because of their good record. It had been bundled through policies I paid. Rachel discovered the emergency credit card she used for temporary gaps no longer worked. The streaming services stopped. The utility auto pay stopped after proper transfer notice. The household account stopped. The illusion stopped. My mother called David 3 times asking if there had been a misunderstanding. There had been for 18 years, but not the kind she meant. 2 weeks after the notice, my mother asked to meet me. I chose a public cafe near the courthouse. Not because I feared her, because old patterns grow strongest in old rooms. She arrived wearing the gray coat I bought her 5 Christmases earlier. She looked smaller, older, but not yet honest. "Emily," she said, sitting across from me, "your father is furious." I assumed. "He says you're trying to destroy the family." "What do you say?" Her eyes filled immediately. That used to work on me. Tears were my mother's smoke alarm. They went off before anyone could find the fire. "I don't know what happened to us," she whispered. "I do." She flinched. I took a folder from my bag and placed it on the table. Not thick. Not all of it. Just enough. The deed. Vehicle titles. A summary of major expenses. Roof. Furnace. Foundation. Taxes. Insurance. Utilities. Rachel's tuition assistance. Medical transfers. Credit card payoffs. My mother looked at the first page. Then the second. Her hand went to her mouth. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask." "That's not fair." "It is exactly fair." She shook her head. "I thought your father handled more. He let you think that. And you let us." That was the first sharp thing she said. And she was not entirely wrong. I had let them. That is the cruel complexity of being used by people you love. At some point, you participate in your own erasure because being needed feels close enough to being valued. I keep everyone stable," my mother whispered. "At what cost?" I did not answer, because she was finally asking the right question. Then she said something I did not expect. "I thought silence kept peace." I looked at her. She wiped her eyes. "But it didn't. It kept you alone." For the first time since Thanksgiving, something in my chest loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a hinge moving. My father did not soften so quickly. He sent angry emails through David. He accused me of elder abuse even though he was healthy, employed part-time by choice, and had spent years golfing on a military pension supplemented by my payments. He told relatives I was unstable. He said the Marine Corps had made me cold. He said Rachel only slapped me because I had always looked down on her. Then David sent one certified response with the expense summary attached. Relatives stopped calling. That is the thing about family gossip. It thrives in fog. Documentation is sunlight. By the second month, my parents moved into a small rental. My mother cried when she returned the house keys. I did not go to the walkthrough. David did. He sent photos. The house looked smaller, empty, without furniture, without holiday noise, without the smell of coffee and roast turkey. It was just a structure. Wood, wiring, walls. A place I had confused with belonging because belonging had been so scarce. I put it on the market. My father called that night. His voice was hoarse. "You sold our home? I am selling my property. You don't care what this does to your mother." I cared for 18 years. Quietly, expensively, consistently. "You're cruel." "No, Dad, I'm finished." He laughed bitterly. "With family? With being punished for keeping family alive?" He said nothing. I almost hung up. Then he spoke, lower. "Your sister is looking for work." That surprised me. Good. She says she has no choice. She doesn't. She blames you. She can. Do you? Do I what? Blame me? The question was so late it almost felt like an insult. I looked out the hotel window at the parking lot lights. I had returned to base by then. My life had resumed its strict external order. Uniform, briefings, inventory reviews, shipment schedules. All the things people thought were cold because they had never understood that order can be mercy. "Yes," I said. His breath caught. "For what?" "For watching Rachel hurt me and calling it peace. For taking what I paid for and calling it yours. For teaching me that being low maintenance was the only way to be loved." The line stayed quiet. Then he said, "I don't know how to answer that." "You don't have to tonight." I hung up. 4 months after Thanksgiving, I received a letter. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A letter. My father's handwriting leaned hard to the right, the way it always had. "Emily, I have started this letter 6 times. Each version tried to explain before it apologized. That is what I have always done. I explained Rachel. I explained your mother. I explained myself. I explained why you should understand. I am done explaining. I failed you. I let your strength become an excuse for my neglect. I let your sister's chaos become more important than your dignity. I let your mother's silence become comfort for me. And I let myself believe that because you could survive without protection, you did not deserve protection. You did. You deserved a father at that table. I am sorry." I read it 3 times. Then I put it down and cried in a way I had not cried at the hotel. At the hotel, I had cried from impact. This time, I cried because something true had finally arrived, and truth can hurt almost as much as injury when it comes late. Rachel's apology came differently. Of course it did. She left a voicemail after getting hired full-time at a medical billing office. "Emily," she said, and then paused so long I thought the message had ended. "I hated you because I thought everything was easy for you. I thought you had money because the military took care of you. I thought Mom and Dad helped me because they had extra. I didn't know you were the extra, were the A laugh broke through her voice. Not funny. Ashamed. I should have known. Maybe I did know and didn't want to. I'm sorry I hit you. I'm sorry I made you the villain because it was easier than becoming an adult." I saved the voicemail. Not because it fixed everything, because evidence of accountability is rare enough to keep. The house sold in spring. I did not attend closing in person. The proceeds went into an investment account and a veterans housing fund I had wanted to start for years. Not a charity with glossy brochures. A practical fund. Emergency repairs. Deposits. Legal help. Temporary housing for service members whose families treated them like paychecks instead of people. David reviewed the structure. "You know," he said, "most people in your position would buy a beach house." I might. "Really?" "No." He laughed. "I did too. It felt strange. Good strange." By summer, my mother and I spoke once a week. Not about money. That rule was firm. She asked about my work and waited for the answer. The first time she did that, I almost did not know how to respond. She said, "Tell me what logistics actually means." So I did. I told her about moving supplies before disaster arrives, about making sure the right thing reaches the right people at the right time, about how invisible work is only invisible when it succeeds. She was quiet. Then she said, "That sounds like what you did for us?" I looked at the wall. "Yes. I'm sorry I made it invisible." That apology mattered more than I expected. My father took longer. He had to learn that apology was not a key that reopened every door. It was only a knock. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I did not. Rachel and I did not become close. Not quickly. Maybe never the way sisters are supposed to be in movies. But she paid me back $200 one month. Then $300. I had not asked. The note said, "Not enough, but a start." I kept that too. People think boundaries end relationships. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they reveal whether a relationship ever existed without your sacrifice holding it upright. What happened to my family was not revenge. Revenge would have been easy. I had access. Records. Legal ownership. I could have made it uglier. Instead, I made it accurate. I stopped paying for a lie. I stopped letting people confuse my discipline with permission. I stopped calling exhaustion love. That is all a boundary really is. A correction. A line that says, "This is where my responsibility ends and your consequences begin." On the first Thanksgiving after everything, I did not go home. I volunteered at a veterans center near Oceanside. We served turkey on paper plates to people who understood complicated gratitude. A retired staff sergeant named Miles asked if I had family nearby. I said yes. Then I said, "But I'm learning what that word means." He nodded like he did not need more. At sunset, my mother texted a photo of a small turkey breast, 2 plates, and a store-bought pie. No guilt. No demand. Just a message. "Thinking of you. Hope you are warm." I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back, "I am," and I was Not because everything had healed. Not because my family had transformed into something perfect. But because I was no longer standing outside in the snow waiting for people inside my own house to decide I deserved shelter. I had shelter. I had earned it. And this time, I held the keys.